After reading thousands or even tens of thousands of comments, communicating with all of you, today's topic of the day is why the American system isn't meant for us. I think the first thing we need to define in this conversation is who the us is. And by us, I mean the working class. And I think that this also at this point includes the middle class, because the middle class at this point, for the most part, are also working paycheck to paycheck, just like everyone else. The conversation lately has been leaning towards understanding that things are the have and the have-nots. And for most people in the working class are the have-nots. At its base now, I think we can all agree that the working class really doesn't have the same future that it used to. People used to be able to work a job and still have a home and raise a family. This is out of the question now. It's not even part of the equation. I think interchangeably, the working class can also be called the debt class at this point, because our lives are ran on debt. We use debt for everything, for our mortgage, for our car, for some people, even their groceries. To maintain just the average normal lifestyle in America requires debt to be taken for 95% of the working class. So next would be, who are the they? And in this class, of course, we can say the upper middle class and the upper class, but I think it goes beyond that. Because even the upper middle class at this point, if they're chasing lifestyle, can still be living paycheck to paycheck or be part of that same debt class. More specifically, what I'm talking about when I refer to the they is the asset class. The asset class are the truly wealthy people in the United States. These are people who've accumulated so much wealth in their lives and throughout the generations that for the most part at this point in history, in maintaining their wealth, they've invested heavily into assets. With the devaluation of the dollar, it's the only safe place that they can hedge their bets and maintain their wealth. The fact is, in comparing the two, there's no even or fair distribution of assets. Not when it comes to ownership. People may be able to buy a house, but they'll spend the next 30 years paying that off. That's what it means to be part of the debt class. For your entire lives, in one way or another, you're going to be required to be paying off debt. And if you forfeit the ability to pay that debt, then you'll also forfeit those assets that you believe are yours. And with the increase in taxes and the required insurances that you need to get something like a mortgage, those prices will continue to go up and up and up. And in many cases, like we're seeing with a lot of senior citizens in Florida at the moment, people are either being forced out of retirement or forced to sell their homes in the hope of relocating somewhere else where the cost of living is a bit lower. But we all know that now the cost of living is creeping into all areas, so it's just a matter of time. You can only reorient yourself financially so many times before you run out of places to go. This system isn't meant for us in America because the control of the assets is directly proportionate to the control of power in the United States. Wealth is power. Wealth is respect. Wealth is authority. Wealth is the ability to get your voice heard and that voice actually have impact when it comes to the direction and movement that our government chooses to go, the policies that are created. For the common person, the person without assets, the person without any true significance when it comes to power, their concerns are usually nothing but symbolic. And though there may be some policies put in place to kind of assuage that symbolic need and be a show that, yes, we are working in your best interest, yes, we are trying to help you, for the most part, 99% of all policies that are made in America when it comes to finances lean heavily to the advantage of those in the asset class, those in the wealthiest parts of this country, the highest end of the socioeconomic spectrum. That distribution isn't on a flat plane. And over the past decades, but especially over the past 10 years, we've seen the rates of that distribution skyrocket. We've seen a change in that distribution where ownership of assets, and mostly in the conversation we're talking now, we're focusing on real estate and property. The ownership of property and real estate in America just isn't in the American working class person's favor. It hasn't been in a long time, and it's going to continue to get worse as wealth compounds year after year. And people who now have more wealth than anyone in history see their fortunes grow to the point that's beyond imagining. While at the same time, we may be lucky to get 5, 10, 20% over the next couple years in our growth. But when we're saving, $10,000, $20,000, maybe to get $2,000 or $3,000 in gains after that, it's really of no consequence when those who are at the highest end of that spectrum are pulling in billions of dollars every year just off interest, just by investing their money and letting it sit. The money that they accrue just off holding that money or being able to leverage that money to acquire more assets makes that distribution weigh even heavier to their side. And as we said, that distribution, whoever holds those assets, they hold the power in our government. The working class has no access to significant assets, not in the way that would allow us to leverage them to actually affect any kind of change, because change isn't in the interest of the wealthiest people in our country. The change that they can make to kind of quiet us down is mostly going to be symbolic. And also at the same time, although it may seem like it's going to be change for us, the vast amount of rewards that are going to be reaped from that kind of change is always going to trickle straight up to those same wealthy people who have everything now. Because that's how our system is designed. Things have gotten so expensive, the cost of living has gone up so high, the cost of housing has gone up so high, that people, normal people, don't have access to the attainment of these assets. As I've said before, the easiest way to create generational wealth is to attain real estate, to attain property. But that market is held in a monopoly by the wealthiest people in this country. And a monopoly on assets leads to a monopoly on power. And that's what we have now. The wealthiest people in this country go beyond politics. The wealthiest people in this country have a monopoly on the direction of our country. Even now, we look at the administration that sits on top. While I have my personal opinions on these people, I will say that I'm very hesitant to trust anyone from the ruling wealthy classes to understand the change that's needed to affect normal people's lives in the direction that we need right now. The voice from the commons is completely ignored. Populism in America doesn't really exist. Control of the popular voice may get people elected, but the will of the people, vox populi, no, that doesn't matter in America. It hasn't mattered in my lifetime, and I don't see it changing anytime soon. When we look at what happened to the head of that insurance company, look how the government forces rallied. Look how the government forces mustered every enforcement agent they possibly could and found the guy who did that, right? That's a show of force. That's what happens when normal people stand and step towards challenging power. It doesn't matter the political sides, the people in power in this country will muster everything to show that we can crush you. That every resource this nation has their back. With all the violence that we have in our poorer communities, does the government muster their resources the same way? No. Do those lives mean less? I don't think so. That's the danger of wealth control. That because wealth equals power, the monopoly on power also comes with the monopoly of violence. And traditionally, that's only held by the government. But when the government turns to sycophants who are subordinate to corporate interest and the demands of oligarchs, the people who held that same monopoly on violence have now given it over because they take their orders from someone else. The system isn't made for us. It just isn't. We have no power. We have no access to anything. We have no way to challenge power. Our wishes and our demands are turned into talking points to get people to where they need to be. But as soon as they get there, the changes that they make only continue to funnel resources in the one direction that they've been going for the longest time. You can talk about DOGE, you can talk about creating government and accountability, but the government at this point is just a middleman. The government isn't in charge anymore. The government hasn't been in charge for a while. So to gut the government and say that this is going to fix the problem is ignoring the fact that their manager isn't even in the office that day. And as we see with the increasing disparity in wealth, we see a collapse of the standard of living, not just in the United States, but across the world right now. Because these people that we're talking about, the most wealthy among us, the billionaires, even some trillionaires, people who have amassed a fortune that dwarfs some countries' GDPs, they exist beyond national boundaries. They exist beyond national law. And while we, the commons, who distrust the government and distrust even more law enforcement, since it's just an arm of executive force used by those who held a monopoly on power, at this point in time, we fail to say anything when anyone at that top end of the spectrum actually commits crimes. You know, it's in the news cycle and out of the news cycle as quickly as it came in. There is no justice in this country because it's not made for us. Justice in this country is an illusion. It's a tool for people to get what they want. But it's always directed. It's always controlled. Controlled opposition is all we have in this country. You know, the people have been broken. Any kind of solidarity the people had is constantly fractured. Any time in this country that people see some kind of commonality, you know, either the media or politicians come in quickly to sow division because this system isn't made for us. We are just serfs working on the plantation. That is what we are. We harvest resources that get shipped off and maybe we get to keep a little bit. Maybe we get to keep a little bit, and hopefully if we save up enough, maybe we can double or triple our money. But any growth that we see in that money compared to the inflation that happens, it really means nothing. The money that you're saving now, even if it grows, is going to be essentially worth the same as when you first invested. So what's the point? There is no point, because this system isn't made for us. And the standard of living is only continue to go down. And people say, oh, you just need to adjust, what your expectations in life are. You can't expect to have all these things. You can't expect to have a house. You can't expect to have a family. You can't expect to have a car. And these things that were all considered normal and simple things to attain as long as you worked a 40-hour-a-week job are now unattainable, even if you're working 60 to 80 hours a week. As we said, over 90% of people in America believe that the ownership of a home is required to actually attain the American dream. But in the balance of that distribution, actually going out and trying to find a home, you're not just competing with the people next to you who have the same wages. You're competing with people who have so much money that you simply can't compete. We are a nation built on the expectation of fair play, that everyone can get a leg up as long as they do the right things. They make all the safe moves in life, but there's no moves that you can make now unless you were born into the right family or you get incredibly lucky at this point now that you can actually move up. The era of class migration is quickly coming to an end, and that's specifically because the disproportionate ownership of assets in this country, the asset class, the ownership class, they own this country now. Not the politicians, though some politicians may be part of that class. Most of them are just middlemen who are chasing some kind of fame. And talking about it seems to not have a point anymore. Bringing up these issues, and even if I have a video that gets 400, 500,000 views, does it actually mean anything? And the thing is, this isn't new to anybody. We know this. We know this is happening. So why haven't things changed? We know things are going to get worse. So why haven't we put pressure on people? And we know that it needs to happen. And I'm seeing it in the comments because I talk at this point to tens of thousands of you. And the sentiment is one of radicalism, like this comment. The reason why nothing's going to change and it's getting worse is that food and job security is a feature of the societal meat grinder we live in, not a bug. We're pushing towards a renter economy where the ideal is that nobody owns anything and should be content with it. And of course, we all remember you will own nothing and be happy, but this is what we're being forced into. Slowly, it's happened over decades and over generations, but we're coming to a head now. We're coming to a head now where an entire generation, unless they inherit a home from someone, they're out of the ownership market. We are going into a rental economy where we are becoming serfs to the wealthy once again. And that's something that we fought very hard to get away from. But here we are. This USA and its sick society its denizens live under needs cheap labor to sustain itself. They abhor W-2 workers due to the strings attached that it contains and would rather everyone be 1099 contractors that they don't have to provide any form of benefits to. And I've had some comments say that, benefits aren't important. But I strongly disagree, especially if you have a family. If you have any idea of how much health insurance costs in the United States, if you have a family with a husband and wife and 2 kids, if you're not having health insurance through your work, then you're looking at $20,000 to $30,000 a year just to pay for their insurance. And if you do have insurance through your work, it's still expensive, looking at like $8,000 to $12,000. But it's nothing like it is without the benefits that come with that. So it is important. It is something that we fought to get. It wasn't just something that was offered by corporations. We're transitioning into an oligarchic form of governance. We're already there. Where a select few large banks and corporations that directly fund super PACs will decide the laws and regulations for everyone else to follow. Heck, we can say that we're already there already. We are there already. We're there already, and we know we're there already. The people who are in charge of our government, whether you love this administration or not, you have to understand they're oligarchs. This is what they are. They're from that billionaire asset class. Trump is known for his ownership of real estate. And Elon Musk being in the position he is, we need to understand that he may not own a ton of property, which I'm sure he does, but he owns something completely different that applies to this generation in particular, which is real estate in the technological space. But I like how it ends. I hope you all live in interesting times. And I think that that's exactly what we need. We need interesting times. And a lot of you know what that means. We need change. There needs to be a limitation to the assets that these people can attain or how long they can hold them. One person shouldn't be able to have thousands of homes. And while that may sound unfair, and I don't know how it can at this point, when no one can afford homes because there isn't enough homes to go around. The fact is that a change needs to happen. And it's not going to be by lowering taxes for the wealthy. Taxes now are very low for the wealthy. And the only people that argue that, taxing the wealthy is unfair when you look at the media are already wealthy people. And anytime these people get to the power that they need to, it doesn't matter. Whenever the political side shifts a power, right, the conversation will change, but they become the same person. When the Biden administration was in, everyone who was on the right was talking about how we need to get in power because there needs to be cultural change in this country. But now that they're in power, the only thing that they're talking about is protecting the rights and the wealth of the richest people in the world. Saying that, they control the jobs, it's all coming through them. They need to have the incentive. Incentive is one thing, but America was at its biggest boom when its tax rate was at its highest for the richest people. You can't just listen to these people who are telling us that you can't touch the rich or everything is going to go down, because the rich people aren't the backbone of this country. The people are the backbone of this country. The working class are the backbone of this country. Understand, the wealthiest people in the world for the past 10 years have been building bunkers in different parts of the world where you can't get to. There's a reason for that. They don't have your back. They don't have your interest in mind. For them, it's self-preservation and how much they can get, because greed is a hell of a thing. And these people are as greedy as it gets. It's just what they know. It's all they know. It's all they are. Ownership and amassing power is what defines them. People like that are truly dangerous. And right now, they control our government. They control our world. And yes, I think it's always been like that, but it doesn't mean that it can't change. People's revolts have happened in the past, whether ideologically or physically. They do happen. And the people have to force change, because we need homes. The new generations need to be able to build homes. They need ownership. If they're going to have any power, if they're going to have any say in this country, that they actually have to own this country. If the people who own this country aren't people, if they're just corporations, or they're faceless billionaires who don't have any interest in the common people's lives, then the common people have to stop giving them power. A change has to be made, and it has to start at the top. It's simple, and it's all that it is. I got this one. The U.S. is the richest country in the world, but much of that wealth is concentrated among billionaires and big corporations, and the wealth gap is growing. Other developed countries may not be as rich, but they often offer a better standard of living with stronger social programs, universal health care, where no one goes bankrupt over medical bills. America's great if you're rich, otherwise life is a struggle. As someone who's not American, I've visited many states and cities, and I'm always shocked by the poverty and rundown conditions. In some communities, America is all about money. It's true. As I've talked about in one of my recent videos, I had to go to the ER and essentially got a flu test and a Motrin, and ended up walking out with a $6,000 bill. There's something very wrong with our country. We're a country that's known for having an amazing lifestyle, and we're always told that our healthcare system is second to none, but who can afford it? I can't afford it, and I make more money than a lot of people in America do. And it's a very common thing, people going into debt because of medical services. And we see the anger and lashing out that's been happening lately because of such things. But do we see any change happening? No, we don't. I've lived in other countries that have more affordable healthcare, and it makes a huge difference in the living population, where there's no stress to actually go to the doctor because they're not afraid that they're going to pick up thousands of dollars in bills. I've had to get emergency medical services in different parts of the world, and I can tell you I've never been more stressed out than when I am in America. And I've never had to wait as long as when I do when I'm in America. The idea of triage in America is ridiculous. I've seen people in emergency room, waiting rooms, waiting for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours when they think that they're having a heart attack. And just by sitting there and waiting, they're accruing vast medical bills and getting zero treatment. It's not right. It's wrong. And in the end, it's just because the system isn't made for us. And it's that simple. And anytime these issues are brought up and they actually get any kind of traction in mainstream media, what happens, it's dismissed and talked away and said, maybe something will be done with it. And it's only because the media only serves the interest of the wealthy. They don't have our back. So stop listening to them. Listen to each other. The experience that you're going through is a very real experience, and you're not alone. Things are getting worse, and they're continuing to get worse. This isn't fear-mongering. This is just truth. And truth is the only thing that matters now. And with that truth has to come accountability. But I do believe that change can be made. I do believe in the power of people, because the fact is there's many more of us. There's many more of us going through the same thing, and these people have no idea what we need or what we're capable of. So I say engage in that part of your mind that's more radical, and understand that it's not just a crazy part of you thinking. Maybe it's just your mind's way of trying to recognize that something is wrong and that there needs to be some way to address it. But anyway, if you have any ideas, any comments, any questions, leave them down below. Like and share. Let's get the word out a little bit. It's a real interesting thing being able to communicate with so many of you, and just continue to do so, because it's really changing the way that I think. And I think we're all kind of gaining a better idea on the things that need to be done in this world. And that there are many of us out there who are seeing the same things. And the more of us that are out there actually saying something about it, the more people there are hearing it, and the more the conversation becomes undeniable and has to be heard, it has to be had. So again, thanks for stopping by. I love you guys. Have a good one.